Looks like we are good to go. All right, so good evening, everybody. Welcome to the workshop meeting of the Board of Education. Today is Tuesday, January 12th. And we have 7 board members present, so I'm going to go ahead and call us to order and go start with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you to those wonderful students from Nora Public Schools. I love doing that that pledge that way. I feel like even if and when we're able to meet in person again, we might want to continue doing that. That's great.
Yeah. Shout out to Jefferson School.
Shout out to Jefferson.
Thank you very much to Dr. Beck.
Absolutely. So tonight we have a workshop session about our recommended operating and capital budgets for 2021 and 2022. We have one business item on the agenda. And with that in mind, even though we did not get any emailed comments, I'd like to ask the board if it's okay to add a short comment section now, just for that business item before we vote on it.
So moved.
Thank you, Barbara. Any second for that motion?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor of having a public comment section for the business item tonight, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, that looks unanimous. Heidi, I think you're frozen again. Okay, so right now I just want to open it up. I know we did not get any comments via email. Just in case anybody wants to make a comment on the business item for tonight.
Sure. So if anybody in the room would like to raise their hand if you have any comments to make.
Once, twice. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that if somebody had that, wanted to, they had that opportunity. So let's move to that one business item. This is the approval of the contract with the Connecticut Center for School Change and developing the district's new strategic plan and central office redesign. Dr. Estrella, do you want to just introduce that?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. We had a rigorous process to identify the organization that would be supporting us in the design of the new strategic operating plan. We identified as a result of that the Connecticut Center for School Change as the organization that will be working with us in those efforts. They already started engaging us in conversation around the work. We had our first task force conversation this past Thursday, and we will continue to have those conversations every Thursday at between 5 and 7 p.m. with the hopes that we can articulate a draft of the new strategic plan by at some point the end of this month, February, and we will then formulate an advisory task force that will support us in reviewing and providing the current task force with feedback around the process. And we will continue to revise, and hopefully by March and April, we will have a final strategic plan that we can put into effect July 1st. So this document that you have is the approval of this work. I just want to articulate and thank the B Foundation and Rich Wenning for funding half of our strategic plan proposal. So we are actually only paying half of the cost because the B Foundation is covering the other portion of the study for us.
So that's good news on many fronts. So I'd like to open this up for discussion, or can we have a motion? Okay, thank you, Barbara. Any second? Diana,
Dan.
so it's, thank you for moving it to the floor. Any discussion about this business item?
I think this is just very exciting to be at the, front edge of a new era and to bring the full community aligned behind a clear vision of what we want for our children and our community. It's very exciting.
Agreed. Any other comments, questions, discussion? I just wanted to mention that we just got off working with CFC, the Connecticut Center for School Change, on the capacity and coherence review for NPS. And I have to say I was thoroughly impressed with both the scope and breadth of their work, the dedication and commitment, and quite frankly, the enthusiasm of Richard Lemons. And I'm excited to work with them on this important work to kind of shape our focus going forward. So if there is no further discussion, I will call this item for a vote. All in favor of approving the contract for CFC, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. And so that allows us to move now into our work session, in which we get the first public presentation of the operating and capital budget requests for 2021 to 2022. And again, Dr. Estrella, I'll pass it on to you.
So thank you, Chair Collin. So today we're going to provide you with an introduction of the proposed budget for 21-22. I want to thank everybody for affording me the opportunity to present today the first budget as your superintendent. As you can imagine, the circumstances this year have made it difficult to set the priorities that we're going to outline today. One, because we are in the process of outlining our new strategic operating plan. Secondly, because COVID has created a lot of unpredictable metrics that we're still dissecting and further assessing as we continue to learn the impact of COVID in the mental well-being as well as the academic well-being of our students. I want to discuss some of the driving factors around this year's budget, one of which is the increase in insurance costs. We had a 25.9 increase, which resulted in a 2.9% increase in our district's operating budget for the upcoming school year. One of the things that we were very mindful as we embarked in this upcoming year's budget is the fact that with COVID, I know the city as well as many other entities have faced unprecedented challenges in the upcoming fiscal year. So one of the things that we try to do is set priorities based on the current funding allocations that we had, and only set forward a 2.7% increase to meet staff priority needs and contractual obligations. And this will fulfill the cost for our teachers, paraeducators, administrators, custodians, nurses, and other staff and personnel. We also know that COVID will create certain instructional loss for our students. And one of the things that we had to do is rethink how we were utilizing our current funding to ensure that our scholars had the support they need when they come back to full in-person instruction. As you know, several of our students, especially in K-3, didn't have the hardware in March when we transitioned into full remote. And in addition to that, connectivity was a challenge at some point. So we want to make sure as we think through this budget, how we set parameters and structures in place to ensure that the needs of our students is met in the upcoming school year. So one of the things you will notice as we continue to engage in our conversation today is that we have included specialists and reappropriated funds in different areas to ensure that we address the impact of COVID, which, as you can imagine, it will be significant and disproportionately distributed amongst our community, depending on the access and resources that our students have within their homes. Next slide. We also have to take into account some of the research and studies that we have seen in cases where students have experienced instructional loss because of different forms of tragedy. We know what, with the incident with Katrina, it took over 2 years for certain students to recover from the learning loss that they experienced. We also have information from the 1918 influenza pandemic, where the economic repercussions associated with that pandemic had an adverse impact in the students and their well-being. So we want to make sure that as we think through this budget, we are prioritizing these the learnings that we've already had from prior experiences and utilize this information to inform the work that we're going to do in the upcoming year, particularly in making sure that we have adequate interventionists in our schools to support any learning loss that is associated with COVID, and make sure that our students have what they need to be successful despite the challenges COVID has presented for us. In addition to COVID, one of the other factors that we're looking at, we can move to the next slide, is also the work that we're doing around the strategic operating plan and making sure that as we look at all of the studies that are being conducted this year, the equity project, the listening and learning tour that I engaged in with members of the board, the capacity and coherence study, the special education review, and the facility study, that we utilize all of this information to inform the work ahead. So as we continue to present the budget today, we also need to keep in mind that this will be an ongoing conversation as we continue to learn from the findings and think about what the table of organization will look like for the 21-22 academic school year.
Okay, I think you're done now, Dr. Estrella, I think.
Over to you.
Okay, great. And hopefully you are seeing the slides change. I've got 2 different things on 2 screens here. So if the slides aren't changing, please let me know. So it's a pleasure to be with you again, board members. This is the 6th time that I will be involved in presenting a budget to you. And, you know, as always, it's a really Herculean effort that involves a lot of people. And so I want to start by, you know, thanking Kristen Karschmidt and also Nina Laria on my staff, who have put in just amazing hours and work in order to get us to this point. And I want to acknowledge their efforts and their work in producing this budget. I also, of course, want to thank Dr. Estrella for her support and guidance as we've moved through this budget development process, and my colleagues in all of the other Board of Education offices as well, because it really is a joint effort of everyone to produce a budget. So as the superintendent indicated, the budget that we're presenting tonight really is driven first and foremost by health insurance costs and increases in health insurance costs. So health insurance makes up 2.9% of the total 5.6% increase in the requested budget. So the largest share of the increase is attributable to increases in health insurance. And I'm going to talk at some length about what is driving health insurance this year. The other major big drivers, if you will, of the budget are changes in wages, which our labor contracts do provide for modest increases in wages. And so the budget has to incorporate that as well as any changes in staffing levels. And so 1.5% of the total increase is attributable to changes in wages in this budget. And then the last two pieces, 0.7% or $1.5 million is attributable to what was really a one-time budget gap closing strategy from last year, where we used the surplus from last year, or used 1.5 million of the surplus from last year to help support this year's operating budget. So at this point, we've assumed that those carryover funds will not be available to support the budget in the following year. So that translates into a 0.7% of the total 5.6% increase. And then all the other increases combined net out to a 0.5% increase. So as the superintendent indicated, a large part of the situation for us this year is really dealing with the impact of COVID on student achievement and on readiness to learn. And so one of the major initiatives that you will see in this budget coming forward is the creation of new positions in the area of literacy and in the area of math to provide additional supports to our students, as well as an additional resource to our teachers in terms of coaching opportunities. And this is really all designed to address the impact of COVID and the need to really accelerate our students' readiness to learn in this really challenging environment. And the second point to make here, as the superintendent indicated, we have multiple studies and initiatives that are underway. The equity study, the facilities master plan update, the capacity and coherence review, an HR study, and the special education study. So all of those things may come forward with recommendations which could impact budget decisions. So people should just be prepared that when it comes time to reconcile the budget in June, there could be some tweaks that people will want to make to the budget to accommodate recommendations that might come out of those studies. And finally, you'll see us talk in several places about accountability measures to make sure that the funding that we are putting in this budget goes to the places where it is going to have the greatest impact on student achievement. So there's a number of initiatives, and with those initiatives, we have indicated the need to develop and put in place accountability measures. So that is also part of what's being proposed here. So just a couple of things I want to point out. This is a summary by major object of the actual expenditures from last year. The original budget for this year, the $208.4 million, the amounts that were requested by our various departments of $224.8 million, and the amount that's being recommended by the superintendent of $220.1 million. So the recommended budget that's before you is this column here, $220.1 million. That's the $11.7 million increase, or the 5.6%. Now, a couple things to point out here. One is, as we indicated, employee benefits is far and away the the real driver of the budget increase at almost $7.6 million, followed by salaries at 4.9 or close to $5 million. There's a couple of other things to point out. We do have some areas where the budget is going down, and I will talk further about that. But in the area of professional and technical services, the budget year over year is going down by almost $1.4 million. And in the area of other services, the budget is going down by approximately $1.2 million. So again, I will talk a little bit more about that, but a lot of that is being driven by special education in the case of other services, where we have seen the impact of the Special Education Development Fund from several years ago, where we have added staff to build in-house programs and in-house capacity so that we can provide a full continuum of special education services. And as a result of the build out of those programs, we have seen now absolute reductions in our out-of-district tuition accounts. And that's the major driver of this reduction here of 1.2 million. In terms of professional and technical services, it's a combination of items. There's one item that is really an accounting adjustment. You'll see an increase on the bottom of the page here under other objects of $630,000. That's being driven primarily by moving the subsidy that we budget for food service from a 330 account in professional services to its own object series in 900, because we think that's where that belongs, is properly coded. So that's a accounting change that accounts for about $630,000. The rest of it is what I would term real reductions in professional and technical services in a variety of areas, and I'll talk a little bit more about those later. So the next slide is just a graphic of how we spend our money. And I think the big takeaway here is the big portion of the pie here at 62% is salaries. And if you add salaries and employee benefits together, it totals nearly 80%. So we are very much a people business. Our costs are driven by people, and that's not a particular surprise, but the reality is that's where we spend the vast majority of our money is on people, salaries and benefits. So the remaining pieces are relatively small components of the overall budget, 3.6% for supplies and materials, 3.3% for property services, 3.5% for professional and technical services, and so on. So we're drilling a little bit deeper into kind of what are the real drivers of the budget. And we talked about health insurance. So we'll talk a little bit more about health insurance and the other items. So the base increase really in health insurance before we add the impact of any new hires is $6,053,000. I have another schedule on health insurance coming up in a few slides. But if we add to that the 623,000, that represents the total increase in health insurance, including the health insurance anticipated costs for new hires. And these numbers, then lay out the other major drivers here, the contractual increases that we talked about at just over $3 million, the $1.5 million for the budget gap closure carryover from the last year that doesn't carry forward to the new year. And then there's a series of other items that we've tried to lay out really what are the big ticket items that are moving the budget. You'll see some changes in what we refer to as the 150 object code, which is really a holding account for us. And we have one of the proposals here, again, I'll talk about it more in a moment, but we have proposed some changes to the magnet program. And as a result of that, we are shifting the magnet funding. We're both reducing the magnet funding and shifting it back to the 150 account. And again, the superintendent and I will be talking more about that in a moment. We also include in the 150 account the holdback for enrollment changes for the schools. And we have made an assumption that we can reduce that holdback from a 1% holdback down to a 0.5% holdback. So there's some offsetting numbers here. We've moved magnet money back to the holding account, but then we've reduced the holding account by reducing the what the schools are required to set aside from 1% down to 0.5%. So the net of that is it equates to $770,000. Pointed out degree level changes here because this is a line item that did see a fairly sizable increase year over year. And that represents teachers who have gone back to school and have moved further up on the salary lane schedule as a result of earning more advanced degrees. We think that some of that is actually related to COVID because as particularly in the spring when employees were working from home, that there may have been more people taking more courses, appears to be the case. Unemployment, we're also seeing pretty large increases in our unemployment claims, and we expect that to continue next fiscal year, and that is certainly COVID related as well. Social Security and retirement are really just sort of inflationary increases based on changes in number of retirees and so forth. The contractual service reductions, I already made reference to this. So $421,000 was a shift of the food service subsidy from one line item to another, but there were real reductions of $972,000 to the contractual services accounts. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those in a moment. Outsourced custodial services, the number has gone up because we have additional schools that have been outsourced. There is, of course, substantial savings from outsourcing so that it does make financial sense for us to do this. But there is an adjustment year over year to account for that, the fact that there are additional schools that have been outsourced. Student transportation, small increase percentage-wise, it does amount to a couple $100,000. And just remind everyone that we did go through an RFP process last year. And as a result of that process, realized a substantial savings in our transportation costs. I think it was about an 8 or 9% savings in transportation because of the new contract there. In addition, we moved to a propane fueled bus fleet, which has important improvement in terms of air quality considerations for our students and really for everyone in the community. But there is a small increase that is built into that contract going forward for next year. I mentioned already the reduction to special education out-of-district tuition. That's the 562 account and the 563 account. And that is a direct result of the programs that we built in-house. And we have now far fewer students. I think we've provided you with some documentation on the number of students who are outplaced over the last 5 years. And I believe 5 years ago, we had about 137 students were outplaced, and we're down almost to about half of that number at this point. So there has been, some savings in that account. Food service subsidy, as I indicated, that's a accounting move from the 300 series object codes to the 900 series object codes. We are projecting, based on actual experience from last year, that number is going to be $638,000. So it's a fairly significant amount that we do have to contribute to food services to balance their budget. The health insurance for new hires, I mentioned already, and then all other changes a negative 333,000. So that really captures on one page the major adjustments up and down to the budget. So diving a little deeper into health insurance, since this is the largest area of increase in the budget. First, I want to point out that when we look at our health insurance numbers, we see that really for 4 years in a row, our numbers were nearly flat. It was absolutely a good decision to move to the state partnership plan. It definitely saved the district money over the last 4 years. You know, that it was certainly a decision that I think was appropriate. Now, at this point, the numbers are still projections because the state does not actually come out with new premium numbers until April 1st. But these are projections that our health insurance consultant has recommended to us. And our health insurance consultant also happens to be the health insurance consultant for the state 2.0 partnership plan. So she has obviously a certain degree of knowledge about claims and so on that the state may be experiencing. So at this point, she has recommended an 8% underlying health trend increase, and that's really based on national norms. So that number will be refined between now and April 1st, and we may have more accurate or up-to-date numbers in about a month or a month and a half. But for purposes of putting our budget request into the city, these are the best numbers we have. The second factor, which we had mentioned last year, because this was really a 2-year situation, and that is what I'm terming here the regional adjustment factor. When the state first came out with the partnership plan and made it available to municipalities and school districts, they set one rate that was uniform across the entire state. And that has, frankly, advantages or benefits for those of us in Fairfield County, where things tend to be more expensive in Fairfield County than they are in other parts of the state. And that holds true for healthcare as well as many other types of things. And so the state, in their judgment, decided that they needed to build in a regional adjustment factor, which is now based on counties. So each county in Connecticut will have a different rate under the state partnership plan. And the expectation is that the Fairfield County rate in total needs to be 7% higher than the average statewide rate. They factored in 3.5% last year, and then we believe they'll be factoring in 3.5% next year. So that means you add those numbers together and you're at 11.5% really in terms of underlying costs and movement of underlying costs. I do think it's important to also point out that ultimately, this is the exact same plan that city employees are in. The Board of Ed pays the exact same rates that the city is paying for city employees. There are some other factors that also impact the ultimate amount that we need to budget for health insurance. One is, my next bullet point is the insurance fund drawdown. Last year, when we were putting the budget together, there were still funds available in the insurance fund, $2,750,000, and we recommended drawing that last balance down last year because it just wasn't needed anymore, since this plan is effectively fully insured for us. We pay a premium. We don't need a insurance reserve fund in a situation where it's a premium-based plan. But since we drew down the last of the insurance fund with the budget that we're currently in, the 2021 budget, for the 21-22 budget, that $2,750,000 needs to be replenished or made up when we put together the final calculation of how much money we need to put in our budget. There was also a modest increase in employee counts. at the point last year's budget was put together, we had 1,454 employees, and the counts we're working with here are 1,502. So we have to account for that. There are some other offsets that go the other direction for us. Employee premium cost shares are going up and are currently now at 18%. And so the employee premium cost share that we can factor into our calculations has gone from about 5 million to about $6 million. There's also some increase in grant reimbursement that we apply. Any employees whose salaries are paid from grants, we put the related employee benefits in the grants as well. And so that number is also going up by several $100,000. And finally, my last bullet point is we are evaluating alternatives. We've asked our health insurance consultant to review whether or not it would make any financial sense for us to look elsewhere. I don't want to give too much false hope here, because actually my expectation is that the analysis will probably come back and estimate that the state partnership plan is still the most favorable place for us to be. But if it turns out that the health insurance consultant finds otherwise, and if they find that there is substantial savings by moving to a different health insurance plan or moving back to our old health insurance plan, which was a high deductible plan design, then that's something we certainly would need to consider. So we do expect to get some further information from our health insurance consultant, but it will probably, again, is not going to be before we have to submit this budget to the city, but it would certainly be before the city finalizes their budget for next year. So this is a bit of an eye chart. There's just a few items I kind of want to point out. So the top line number up here, the 40,727, represents the impact of the 11.5% expected increase in rates, as well as the increase in the employee count. Here is where you see the $2.7 million. You can see that $2.7 million was budgeted as an offset in 2001. And we're not, we don't have that money to budget in 21-22. So that represents a $2.7 million swing. The next line down is the employee premium cost share. So that's where we see our employee premium cost share going from 5 million to 6 million, and the grant reimbursement going up by about $400,000. Here's the new hires at the 623,000 that I had previously referenced. And this number here, general fund budget contribution of 32.5 million, is the recommended budget contribution for next year for health insurance. And that compares with the prior year at 25.8 million. So that's the $6.6 million increase. So the next major driver, and this is again just sort of drilling down a little bit further. This is the $3 million increase in employee wages. These are regular wage accounts, so they exclude things like stipends and overtime and substitutes, but they reflect the wages for all of our regular employees. It does reflect any new positions that have been requested as well. So in ESG, you'll see, the webmaster, a new webmaster position is in there, and a new technician in the IT department is in there. In the nurses line, we've got increase of, I think it was 3 occupational therapists related to special education, and that relates to the decrease that we have in contracted services. And then, of course, we have a number of areas where we have some reductions in wages as well. Overall, though, at a 2.4%, we're really coming in at a number that is at the end of the day is mostly made up of just general normal wage increases. The next slide provides again, by our major object series information on FTEs. And so total FTEs under this budget would be at 1556, up from 1550. The major movers here are really in the teachers line and in the aides line. And in teachers, we're picking up the additional math specialists that we'll be talking about further in a moment. And we're picking up an additional gifted and talented teacher and a handful of other teacher positions. And in the 122 account, which is the aides line, we're picking up a new health office aide. We're picking up a new SLPA or speech and language pathology assistant. We're picking up additional paraeducators that consist mainly of ABAs, which are needed to meet existing IEPs and the requirements of IEPs. In total, it's not a huge change in staffing. Did want to talk a little bit more about the addition of the literacy specialists and the math specialists. And the actual title of this is still being worked on. I know we've got our curriculum folks on this meeting as well, and they may want to jump in here. But essentially what we're looking at is 16 new literacy specialists at the elementary schools and at the middle schools. All of the literacy specialists are being funded through grant funding, and the literacy specialists are going to support students who are experiencing reading and writing difficulties, and about 70% of their work we expect will be involved in direct student support. And then the remaining 30% will be really in working with our teaching staff and opening up classrooms to demonstrate teaching practices to other educators so that they can share best practices and share their experience and their expertise with their colleagues. Similarly, with respect to math, the math specialists, there are 12 math specialists included in this budget, one for each elementary school. The 7 of those math specialists are funded in this local budget, and the remaining are funded in grants. And again, about 70% of the work of these math specialists will be involved in directly supporting students who are experiencing difficulties with conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, strategic competence, and numerical reasoning. And then about 30% of their time will be spent assisting teachers and coaching and again providing sharing their expertise with other teaching staff. And again, if there's questions, I do know we have our curriculum folks on who can probably answer any questions about this initiative more completely than I can. I think the superintendent, was going to jump in and talk about the next couple of items. You're muted, Alex.
My apologies. So the program that we wanted to further discuss is the Magnet program. As you know, we started an initiative around creating different magnet programs around the district. And one of the things that we want to ensure as we kind of re-strategize the way we're utilizing funding throughout the district is the methodology that we're using around magnet programs, but most importantly, really redesigning the magnet program and having a clear distinction in terms of what it is and what it's not, making sure we differentiate between a theme and a magnet school. Also remove the immediate allocation of per pupil allocation within the magnet schools to really institute a process that will allow schools to apply for this funding based on the priorities that are in alignment to their program. And we had to reduce the funding, as Mr. Hamilton articulated earlier, from 2.5 million to 1 million to provide the resources necessary to organize the literacy and mathematics specialists, thereby creating an opportunity for us to rethink and reimagine our magnet programs, but most importantly, set clear accountability metrics around achievement and setting clear measurable goals when this funding is allocated in assessing the success and well-being and outcomes of our students within these programs. We're looking to conduct year-end reviews of student achievement within these programs based on the funding allocation. And the funding right now lies in the 150 account until we engage our schools in the application process and identify where the funding will be allocated. The other piece that I think is really significant and will bring added programming to our schools, especially after COVID. I think students really need to re-engage themselves in physical activity. I know child obesity will be something that we will have to further address and engage in the upcoming school year, because of the fact that COVID has created circumstances that limit the mobilization of our students. So we want to provide, we intend to restore the previous funding within our 4 middle schools for athletic programs, particularly because we also want to address the fact that we want all of our students to have access to competitive sports, and not having the opportunity to engage in athletics in middle school unless they have the means to participate in a private league limits several of our students in having access to competitive sports in high school. Unlike the program that we had in the past, one of the things that will be very unique in the way we engage middle school sports is that we're seeking to have a large number of students participate in athletics and not just have a process where they have to try out. We're doing this because we want to make sure that we provide students the opportunity to love the sport, to embrace the sport. Every child learns and develop the skill sets amongst the different disciplines at different rates. And we don't want to create a situation where a child loses the love for a particular activity because they didn't make the tryouts in middle school. We're going to be looking at some research from the Aspen Institute, which speaks to a lot of this methodology. And we're hoping to have a really robust program in the upcoming school year. This funding allocation also sits in the 150 account until we further engage our athletic directors, our school leaders, and I know some of our board members are really interested in engaging in these conversations as we kind of redefine for Norwalk what middle school sports will look like. But most importantly, that we're doing this so that all our students have access.
Okay, so my next slide is really a summary of reductions that we made to the budget. And I put this in here because sometimes we hear from people who mistakenly believe that the Board of Ed budget is that we never reduce anything in the Board of Ed budget, that there's this mistaken belief that no line item in the Board of Ed budget ever goes down. And so I pulled the numbers, and there are actually 405 separate individual line items that went down from the 2021 budget to the 21-22 budget. And now some of those are just, cases where something got moved from one account to another and so on. But there are a number of what I would term real reductions in various places in this budget. So the purpose of this slide really is to just highlight some of those reductions. And
Jack, Mr. Hamilton, one of the things we're also in the midst of engaging in is an efficiency study between the district and the city that will allow us also to acquire additional information and how we can become more efficient in the way we are utilizing the different departments and agencies between the city and the Board of Education. So we are looking forward to the findings of that study to continue to allow us to find more effective ways of minimizing costs throughout the system.
Right. So I think that, that is an effort certainly that we look forward to, participating in and engaging in. But even without the efficiency study, frankly, there are many areas, in fact, where we have made reductions. So I've identified some big ticket items here. There's reductions to a variety of non-wage accounts, but they total, I've got a list that totals almost $4 million. We've got $535,000 in special education. We've got a couple $100,000 in facilities in their non-wage accounts. We've got reductions in legal fee accounts and a variety of other reductions. So out-of-district tuition and contractual services in special education are probably the two biggest areas, but really there's many, many accounts that make up this $3.9 million. There's also the reduction to the magnet school supplement of $1.5 million as that program is redesigned. There's 8 positions that were funded this year that are not funded next year, totaling $945,000 in salary. We did pick up a savings of about $545,000 in this budget it's really an assumption change in terms of how we budget for our 10-month employees. It does mean that our budget will be more tightly balanced. So there'll be less likelihood that we're going to end the year with a surplus, but we've essentially reduced the wages that are required in the budget by 2 weeks because of the fact that our 10-month hourly employees don't get paid during school vacations. So we've picked up, recognized that savings there. And then finally, we reduced the 1% holdback. I already mentioned that. We reduced the 1% holdback to a 0.5% holdback in the student-based budget, and that translates into $431,000 of savings. So all told, we're coming up with about $7.4 million of accounts that are lower in next year's budget than they were in this year's budget. The next slide is a summary slide of per pupil spending, and it distinguishes a portion of the budget that is held district-wide and services the entire district. The first line here, the $117.9 million, which encompasses everything from health insurance to transportation to special education. And then the numbers below them, which total 102 million, which are the direct student-based budgets, which are primarily building-based staff, teachers, and other folks who are working directly in the school buildings. And then this schedule also shows projected enrollment and the corresponding per pupil allocations. And these would then be the amounts that would factor into the student-based budgets when we send out student-based budget packages to the principals, usually the end of January or thereabouts, and then they start working on the student-based budgets at that point. Next slide is a 10-year history of enrollment, and a couple things I want to point out on this slide. First, if you look at where we were 10 years ago, we were at just barely over 11,000 students, and now we're, approaching 12,000, or 12,000 students. So, we have seen a pretty steady increase in almost every year of the last 10 years. Now there was a decrease here in for 10/1/2020, and it was about a 1% decline from the actual enrollment the year before at 11,612. And of course, in the COVID environment, I don't think it's at all a surprise that there would be a decline in enrollment. We know that that a number of parents are keeping their children home for homeschooling, and we expect that when the COVID situation has passed and we have a effective vaccine that's been widely deployed, that many of those students, most of those students, will be coming back to the district. We know that that there are pre-K students where parents have elected to keep their children out for a year because they just think that's the best way to approach it. We've looked at the enrollment numbers in pre-K as well as the delayed entry to kindergarten. And again, we believe those students will all be coming back. So the 11,808 is the projected enrollment from our demographer, and would represent the highest enrollment in the past 10 years. And so even though it's slightly lower than what the demographers had been projecting for next year prior to the pandemic, when they had done their projections in 2019, they were projecting it was going to be even higher. But at this point, they are projecting continued growth in enrollment for next year. I don't want to belabor enrollment, but just quickly point out on this slide that there are actually three different enrollment lenses that we look at. So when we talk about enrollment and start talking about numbers, it is important to understand which set of numbers you're looking at. The first row here is the PSIS numbers, and these would be the numbers that get reported to the state of Connecticut. You can compare them from across one district to another, and they are the most comprehensive set of numbers. And by that, I mean they include out-of-district placements, they include students in the NAIOP program, they include students who are in the 18 to 21 or 18 to 22 program. The next set of numbers is the facility or space enrollment numbers. These are particularly useful for facility planning purposes and occupancy purposes. And so these numbers include school readiness that are located in our school buildings, but they exclude the 18 to 22 program. They exclude out-of-district placements, and they exclude pre-K special services, which are delivered typically not in our buildings, but in other pre-K programs, or sometimes even at home, I guess. And then the last set of numbers is the SBB enrollment numbers. And again, they exclude all pre-K, they exclude the 18 to 22 program, and they exclude out-of-district placements. We did put on here as well multilingual learners at 2,085, and I believe we actually have a later slide on multilingual learner enrollment as well. I'm going to kind of skip over these. These are really the details on school by school and so forth. These are the PSIS numbers. So if there's questions on them, certainly we can come back to them. And then this is the slide I'd indicated here of multilingual learners. Last year, we were at 2,095. And this year, October 1, we are at 1977. We are down a bit. We're down by 118 students, or about 5.6%. However, if you look at the footnote down below, an important point to note here is that children reach mastery, and when they reach mastery and test out of the program, they're no longer counted in these numbers. So at the end of last year, 248 students reached mastery and exited the program. So we lost 248 students in the count, but the actual number year over year only went down by 118 students. And again, because of the pandemic, we know that there's been just much less movement of people and migration. And, we think that as we come out of the pandemic, that we're likely to see these numbers start to trend back up again. I don't want to spend a long time on it, but we do have information in our budget document, and we share with you here on not only the general fund, which we identify here as Fund 11. That's the locally funded budget. That's what comes from the city of Norwalk of $220.1 million. In addition to that, we have a handful of programs that are really fee-based programs to the tune of $354,000. We've got a larger pot of money in grants, and I'll talk a little bit further about those that total just over $30 million. And then we have a food service operation, which is funded from both grants and normally funded from meal sales. This year, it's really being funded entirely from grants. But that budget is projected at $6.4 million. So when you add all the numbers together, the Board of Education total all funds budget amounts to $257.3 million. And again, salaries and benefits comprises about 77% of the total. And the $220 million for the local budget comprises just under 86% of the all funds budget, and about 12% is grants and about 2% is food service. This is just a graphical way of representing the same information. Again, you can see the vast majority of the budget is the local budget, both school-based budget and district-wide budget, and the grants make up a relatively small percentage of the total. And the next slide provides some information on the major grants. The school readiness grant at $5.4 million is one of the larger, or I guess is the largest of the grants. Now, most of that goes to private school readiness providers. Only a relatively small portion of it goes to programs that are under the direct control of the Board of Education. But these are the other major grants: excess cost grant, which helps support special education; Title I grant, which comes from the federal government and helps pay for programs to help alleviate or address educational issues related to poverty. The Priority School District Grant, which is a state grant which comes to us again is used for a variety of initiatives that are approved by the state. The CGS grant, which is the magnet grant that helps support the interdistrict CGS magnet program. The Alliance District grant, which is also a state grant, and that money again is spent in accordance with the state grant requirements on things that are intended to help narrow the achievement or opportunity gap. The IDEA grant, which is a federal special education grant, about $3.6 million, and then all other grants combined at about $5.7 million. So those are our major grants. And I guess that really concludes the formal presentation. There are some additional schedules in the appendix, but I'm not going to go through them unless there are questions on them. So I'm going to stop here and open it up for questions.
But before you do, I just wanted to say that I'm really grateful for having such an amazing team. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for the outstanding work that you and your team have done and putting this budget together and presentation for the board, as well as all of the departments who have worked hand in hand with you to work through the 21-22 budget. So thank you. I have an amazing team, so I'm really appreciative of all the work you guys have done. And
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate those kind words.
So as we open up for questions, I just wanted to echo what Dr. Estrella said, that I think that this budget presentation shows a tremendous amount of work. I am grateful for the hours put in by Dr. Estrella, Tom, Kristen, and the entire team. And now I'd like to welcome any questions or discussion from my fellow board members. Tom, if you want to stop sharing your screen so maybe everybody can be on now.
Yes, good idea.
Erica?
I don't have any further questions, but I just want to break up the silence by thanking the team for not only preparing everything that they did today, but for fielding any questions that we had in advance of today's session and integrating the answers to those questions into this public forum so everybody could benefit from that Q&A. The amount of work that you did to prepare for this meeting was outstanding, and thank you very much.
Yes, and kudos to Kristen, who was doing the heavy lifting on that, and I likewise greatly appreciate all of those, all of that work. So,
if I might just say how exciting it is to see us starting to make the moves towards what we plan to do with our strategic operating plan and making sure that all of our school buildings have a baseline of what they need to really succeed, especially in closing the gap, but not giving up on rigor and still maintaining the kinds of programs that allow our students to be truly self-actualized and really reach their potential, which we know is more than just meeting standards. It's about connecting with your passion and having opportunities to have leadership in the area of your interest and resources available both in the school community and also through a network in the community. So I think this is really exciting work. I'm thrilled to see middle school sports come back, and also very excited about the investments in specialists and continue investment in our special education programs and making sure that we have enough people in the buildings to really support our special needs children. So hats off to everybody, and I can't wait to hear more, and I hope we don't lose anything valuable in the reconciliation.
Me too.
I want to say thank you to everyone. I know all the hours and days and weekends that the whole team has been putting in, all the connections that you've made. And thank you, Dr. Stray, in the short period of time. You've done so much for Norwalk Public Schools. And I just want to also say that, you know, this budget could have been really, really, really off the wall with COVID, the extra expenses, everything that we didn't see coming. And this team has done a phenomenal job of keeping that budget, you know, at in a good place, because we would have been asking for so much more. And thank you for looking at all the little details, every little place that we could save, places where we could move money around. And I too am very thankful for middle school sports. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of kudos going around. I just had one question, and it's really for the benefit of folks who may be watching, and to help sort of contextualize, Tom, that so much of this, any increase in the budget is related to the increased insurance costs. Part of that is related to when we switched to this, the state-based insurance a few years ago. Before that, we had been maintaining this sort of fund to help pay for insurance claims. As you explained a few minutes ago, we've now sort of depleted that fund because we don't technically need it anymore. Can you sort of just shed some light on that so people understand why that fund is no longer available?
Sure, yeah, because before we moved to the state partnership plan, the district was essentially fully self-insured for medical benefits. And when you're fully self-insured, now we did have some stop loss that kicked in if claims went over a certain level, then that would become then an insured claim. But the reality is when you're self-insured, there is always going to be some variability, some fluctuation in claims. Some years you may have a good year and claims may run lower than your health insurance consultant projects, and other years you may have a bad year where you just have a lot more claims, than the consultant thought you were going to have. So you have to build in the capacity to manage through the good years and the bad years. The other thing that you have with a self-insured plan that you don't have in an insured plan is that in a self-insured plan, they have what the accountants and insurance actuaries like to refer as run out. And so essentially what that means is we measure at the end of the fiscal year what the liabilities of the city and the Board of Education are as of June 30th each year. And there's some claims that were incurred in May or in June, or somebody's in the hospital in June and they don't get released until July. The bill doesn't come in until August. There's always this run out claim, this run out. And so to capture and record the liability, you have to make an estimate of how much that run out liability is going to be. The old standard used to be 3 months. Now it's probably less than that now because electronic billing and so on and so forth. But there is still, in a self-insured plan, a run out of typically something like 6 weeks worth of claims. And so that has to be reserved. And the way you do that is you reserve that in an insurance fund. So you need to both be able to have a fund set aside for the run out claims, and you need to have some pot of money available in case you have a bad year. And when you're fully insured, as we are now with the state, we get a fixed premium. We know exactly how much we're going to pay per month. The only variable is the number of employees who are electing to take benefits. So there's just a lot less uncertainty in the number when you're fully insured.
Thank you so much for that.
Colleen, can I add just a couple things, if you don't
Please.
mind?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I share, my fellow Board of Ed comments and sentiments about the budget and the hard work, Tom, that you've done with your staff and Dr. Estrella. It certainly takes a village, right? So everybody working together to make this come to fruition and working really hard. So I know I speak for myself, but also for fellow board members. We do appreciate all the hard work and time and effort now. But just a couple thoughts, though, I wanted to add about the middle school sports. And I agree with Dr. Estrella, making sure that all students have access to sports and having a quality sports program and encouraging. We talk a lot about academics. We know how critically important that is, but also having access to sports for many of our students, especially at the middle school level. So I'm glad that that's coming to fruition. And that's something as a board member and my fellow Board of Ed members have been speaking about this for a while. So I'm thrilled that that will be happening. And also in addition, Tom, I know that I'm looking, from 10 years ago, the numbers for enrollment, and now we're so close to 12,000. What is your thoughts on the next 5 years as far as enrollment goes? And I see the steady incline, but how much farther do you think we will go as far as numbers within our schools?
Well, I think the demographers are projecting continued growth, but it does moderate. We have a sort of a bubble that's over the last 6 or 8 years kind of went from elementary and it's now, I think, passed through the middle schools and it's in the high schools now. So they are projecting that it does sort of moderate for a number of years, but then if you go out further, so I think we're kind of expected to hit to stay where we're at for several years, and then ultimately, in years 8 through 12, or 12 through 15, expecting to see some added population at that point. So we have our demographers are updating the 10-year projections, and we'll be bringing those back at some point, I think fairly soon, to the facilities committee. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my recollection was that we've got this certain bubble that's going through, but then it is expected to start to rise again in the out years.
Thanks, Tom. I don't know if maybe we can go back to that slide, because I might have missed part of that, but I know there's always been a concern, and I'm talking a couple of years ago, where we're really comfortable at our elementary level, and then we were concerned by the time some of our students hit middle school and the high school level, especially the middle school, where families were moving out. So I'm glad to see that families are staying in Norwalk, because we have these robust and phenomenal programs throughout all of our 21 schools, including our early childhood programs. But are there numbers that are showing the trends? And again, I might have missed that, but I know the elementary and middle and high school, but actually kind of honing in on the middle and the high school level for numbers.
Well, I mean, I only have the numbers that I shared with you, which are not multi-year. I don't have multi-year projections that I can kind of throw up on the screen on the fly, but I guess I would reserve the discussion for another meeting when we're able to come back with the updated 10-year district-wide projections from our demographer. I think that would be the time to kind of get deep into those numbers.
That would be really helpful. At some point, not now, but I know we have a lot on our plate on what we're doing, but I'd be curious to see the trends at the middle school and high school. I know I feel really comfortable at the elementary and families are staying, but kind of what that trend is starting, from 6th grade on.
Yeah, I mean, certainly our middle schools are still, essentially at capacity, and the high schools are also. I don't know, Frank, whether you have any, insight into the high schools, but my sense is we're pretty close to capacity there as well.
Yeah, our high school populations are the highest that they've been over the past 10 years. And they will continue to remain at that volume and probably increase a bit more over the next couple of years. But as Tom said, the growth, at least according to the demographers, will moderate a bit, and we'll get over 12,000, but it's unlikely that we'll grow much more than that unless there are unexpected changes that we're currently unaware of. It's also unknown really how this COVID pandemic will impact the birth rate in Norwalk and elsewhere, and what that may prove 4 or 5 years out when students are ready for school.
I think it's also the choices that we have, especially at our high school level, right? And then, from college, career to college, college to career, all the programs that we're offering that are having our students are ready by the time, even before they leave high school, and have those necessary skills when they move on. So I think I congratulate all of you, but all the hard work that we've done over the past 4 years in keeping the population here in Norwalk. So we certainly have a lot to be proud of. Thanks.
Thanks, Heidi. Any other comments or discussion regarding the operating budget? Well, thank you, Tom, Kristen, Alex, the entire team. As Dana said, I think this year has been extremely challenging, and all the more so because of how unpredictable it has been. And so to come out with this budget recommendation that, outside of insurance obligations and wages and the 1.5 million sort of closing that gap is essentially flat, as Tom said, like just 0.5% of the budget increase comes from anything else other than fixed obligations. And I appreciate the effort to find savings in different accounts and to fund priorities like middle school sports that are coming back, like thinking about equity of our literacy and math specialists. I think that as we consider all the things that we're going to have to contend with as a result of COVID with related to learning, there's so much that we don't know that we don't even know. I think this budget does a really great job of that learning loss. That said, we know that this is a difficult time for every single person in the city and in the state. I think that I can speak for the entire board when I say we look forward to collaborating with our colleagues on the council and the mayor's office to come to a budget that allows us to kind of move forward in a way that works for everybody. And I want to say, just on behalf of the mayor, the council is meeting tonight, and he did send to me his regrets that he's not able to join us at our board meeting. Otherwise, he would be here with us. So if there are no other further comments or discussion, we can move on to talking about our capital recommended budget for this year.
Okay, I will, I guess, again, share my screen with the capital budget presentation. And do you guys see the actual slideshow, or do you see the preview here?
We see the preview. Now we see the slideshow.
Okay, there we go. Okay, let me just kind of get reoriented. So you should have received both a copy of the presentation I'm going to walk through, as well as the actual capital budget submission package based on the city's capital budget system. And so I'll walk through the highlights of the capital budget request. I know we've got some other folks who are familiar with many of these projects, and so I may ask the superintendent and Brenda Williams and others to chime in on particularly the couple of the bigger ticket items here, and then I'll walk through the rest of the projects. So the page up here now is really a summary of the entire request for next year. This is a 5-year capital plan that we are required to submit. So you will see numbers that stretch out to 2025-26. The primary focus, of course, is really on the, next year's capital request, because next year's capital request, if approved, represents the projects that would then be appropriated and we could proceed with. The remaining 4 years of the 5-year capital plan are really a planning document. And it's obviously important for us and for the city to have an idea of what the capital needs are over the next 5 years. But the out years, years 2 through 5, don't represent an actual authority to spend money, and they don't represent an actual appropriation at that point. It's only the first year of the plan, 21-22, that represents the appropriation. So the first project and the highest priority on the board's or on the administration's, I should say, the superintendent's capital request is the Briggs Family Welcome Center. And this is a new project. It is not one that we previously had on our list, but after spending quite a bit of time talking about it and reviewing it, we've indicated we think it's really the highest priority. I don't know if the superintendent wants to jump in on this or whether you want me to walk through and then you want to make some comments. I'm happy to go either direction, Alex, but I'm sure you probably do want to say a few words about this project in either case.
Lay the points on your slide and then I can interject.
Okay, great. So what the Briggs Family Welcome Center will be really is a one-stop family welcome center for the district. And currently, we have really a very disjointed and for families a very confusing maze that they have to kind of navigate their way through. If you're up here on the 3rd floor of City Hall, at least before COVID, you would frequently find really large numbers of new families who were sort of milling around, waiting to connect with various different district offices and being told, oh, you've got to go over here. Now you got to go to somewhere, you've got to go to your school to register because we have no central registration system. So each school does its own registration. So they have to go to the individual school buildings, but then if they're a multi-language learner, they need to come to the testing services to be tested. And that's here at City Hall. They may need to go to talk to folks in health services. They'll need to talk to folks at food services. They may need to talk to folks in transportation to find out where the bus stops are. There's just a whole host of different offices that a new family coming into the district has to navigate its way through. And what we would like to do is really create a one-stop center so that all of the really community-facing and parent and student-facing services would be available at this center. It would be a central registration office. The multi-language learner testing and services would be provided there. Special education would have services that would be available to families there. The transportation office and health services office, food services, and other community support organizations would all have their operations that new families and other families need to access. The location up there on Main Avenue is on a city bus line. The building itself, of course, is certainly underutilized and is in pretty poor condition. And it's, you know, a rather prominent building that is just sort of being allowed to deteriorate there on Main Avenue. And we think this would be really a tremendous reuse of this this building. We did have the construction manager who was working for the city on the PONUS project, did walk through the building and with Bill Hodel, and has put together a budget estimate of what needs to be done and the cost of that. And that's where this $7 million estimate has come from. And again, we think this would really be a very important addition to the district's services. So again, I know Alex has some strong feelings about this this project, and so perhaps she wants to jump in.
Before I do, Brenda, do you want to add anything?
Sure. There's a couple things. Tom did a great job covering all of it. But I wanted to point out that I think the superintendent's vision for this is really in line with the board's emphasis on customer service over the past couple of years. In many ways, it's a continuation of the customer service work that the board requested and that we executed starting last year, because it does solve a number of issues that parents have pointed out to us consistently over the years in trying to figure out how to navigate everything from registration to transportation to health services. Having the special ed ombudsman in place would be very beneficial. And it really, as Tom said, just gives us one-stop shopping for parents who can find it difficult to figure out, you know, the who, what, and where, and how to sort of work their way through the system. Both parents who are newly registering, but also parents who are coming in for the first time as well. We know that as we looking at the Briggs High School building, the Norwalk Pathways Academy building before, that the cost to renovate this as a school for students was really cost prohibitive. But it is a building that has a storied history here in Norwalk, that is carries a lot of passion with members of the Norwalk community. And it also is a piece of property that's in a very highly traveled area, and to see it sort of not used well is really just a shame. So this would be a really excellent use for this particular property, and I think the superintendent's vision for it would really turn it into something special. It doesn't look like much right now, but it has a tremendous amount of potential. We also know that some of our folks who come to central office, come to our beautiful city hall up here to the third floor to take tests for their students who are not proficient in English. You know, other people who come here looking to do fingerprinting, whatever the case may be. We know that some people are really put off from having to maneuver through an imposing building like this. And it's a beautiful building. City Hall is just gorgeous. But there are times when something like Briggs, once it's brought up to, you know, the status that we believe it can be in for a relatively, you know, an investment that is much less than bringing it up to school code. It would be warm and friendly and welcoming, could be used for community organizations in terms of coming in with meeting rooms and conference space and all that type of stuff. So it really has a lot of promise. And again, just to conclude, it fits in with the board's emphasis on customer service over the past few years. And it also fits in with the city's POCD emphasis on customer service as well. So I think it checks a lot of boxes for us.
So I think Tom and Brenda did an outstanding job of articulating the vision behind this work. The idea is, like they articulated, creating a one-stop shop, cradle to 12th grade. One of the things that we're hoping to do is not only make this a Board of Education space, but a community space that we can work with our partners in bringing resources that will support our families in getting not only the registration component and special education services, transportation, health, food services, and all of the above, but also a place where our families and community at large can come to acquire different resources and information even before students enter our system, so that they can have a one-stop shop and place where they can build awareness around the resources within the organization. We've been in conversations with organizations like Norwalk Acts and talked about the possibility of sharing the space so that we can have individuals within the community that bring other resources that are essential for the well-being of our families to also be at the fingertip of this in this location for our families. With the health clinic, thinking about ways that we can utilize not only the nurses within our current facilities, but also look at some of the health clinics within the community that can provide services around physicals and other healthcare means to our families and students. So the idea is that we put together a robust resource center that welcome all of our families to have kind of a one-stop shop information center, not only for the needs of the schools, but also other resources that are available for them within the community. But also, like, in addition to that, Briggs also offers the flexibility for those families that might not have the means of private transportation to have easy access to the site, while also providing those that do have access to private transportation available parking space to come in and get the resource that they need. Like Brenda articulated, the space doesn't look very inviting at this present time, but it's because the space needs a lot of TLC to bring it up to code 1 and to develop that warm feel that we're hoping to develop in that space. I think finally, the one thing that we don't have as a district is a conference room large enough to occupy large numbers of people to do a large professional learning series or provide professional learning for a large number of teachers, principals, etc. So this will also provide us space, because we could transform the gym into a professional learning center for the district, where we can offer different professional learning experiences for our personnel throughout the district. Something currently right now that we either have to contract out, and in some cases, with the generosity of some of our partners, we're using space from other organizations in the district. But even then, the spaces are limited in terms of their size. And this would provide us a room that has an adequate size to provide professional learning for a significant number of our staff throughout the district. So Tom.
Okay, so I'll keep going unless you want to stop for questions on this, or whether you want me to just keep going, Colin.
Why don't we keep going, Tom, and then we can have
Okay.
questions after.
So the next big project, and this is an out year project, so I want to point out that this is not a project that we have requested for next year or even the year after that. It's requested for design work in 2024 and construction funding in 2025. But it is a major request. It totals $45 million. And so, you know, obviously we have to have some discussion about what this is. And the concept here really is to look at developing a more robust continuum of school to career options for our students, particularly students who may not be intending to go to a four-year college. And what we'd like is we'd like to really build a new career and technical high school that would complement the state technical high school system, not compete with the state system, but that would develop work-based learning opportunities through partnerships with local employers and local businesses and other organizations, and really try to develop the niches that are currently not being served, and for our students and for the workplaces that are located in Norwalk or near Norwalk. And so it will really be focusing on providing students with job training and industry certifications for 21st century jobs. So it, you could think about potentially career options in, for instance, the marine sciences industry or marine services industry, excuse me. So that might be a kind of thing that it doesn't really have a good system presently in place, but this could potentially provide good paying jobs and good training opportunities for our students. So it's really about building a more robust system for all of our students, and so that they're prepared to enter the workforce and to get compete for the jobs that are out there for students for whom that would be a career path that would make sense for them. So we've put this in here for fiscal year 24 and 25. Our thinking is to begin some discussion with the board and with the city about how the Board of Education needs to move over the next 3 or 4 years to address what we think is a underserved area of our student population. And obviously we would want to coordinate as well as possible with the state. Ideally, we would love the state to look at this as something that they would want to get behind and perhaps fund at a enhanced level of state funding. And again, our interest is not in competing with the state technical system, but really complementing that system, but building something unique and needed here in Norwalk. So again, I'm going to ask. I don't know if Brenda wants to chime in, and the superintendent would like to chime in to discuss this request a little bit further.
So one of the things that through my listening and learning conversations, I think as I entered the district that I heard continuously was the concern that once Brig was closed down, that there were limited choices for our students, particularly our disenfranchised youth. And we wanted to make sure that we had adequate programming to provide students alternative pathways into career and technical education. So this high school, which as we further engage in the conversation, one of the things that we might want to take into consideration is maybe having a 6-12 pathway, because a lot of times students become disenfranchised with the schools more. It starts in a lot of times in middle school, and we want to catch them early so that we support them in thinking about their career goals and how they want to proceed in their learning experience early on, and support them through that process. We're hoping that we can align this to the governor's workforce task force initiative that is really looking at different ways that we can enhance the pathways within our schools utilizing some of the robust industries that Connecticut currently has. And when we think about Norwalk, we look at the marina that we have and the opportunity that it provides us in terms of some of the technical training that we can potentially offer within our schools to provide a pathway for our students, if they choose to engage in this particular field of study or learning. But it also won't limit students that with the option of also considering college as an option. This provides them, though, an alternative pathway that will provide them job opportunities while going to college, or if they choose to, as their career path once they graduate high school. But I think is an important aspect of the Norwalk portfolio to take into consideration, because it's an area that we need to really further develop to address some of the need within our programming structure, and to provide options that provide students with either certification or skill sets that will allow them to go into the workforce immediately after high school if they choose to. So we're hoping that we can plan on this particular high school option as something that we can look into and projecting into 2025, so that we have enough time, one, to really plan through the work, but really think about and work with different partners, particularly the state, in finding the resources necessary to bring this project to life.
Okay, I'll go on. And so the remainder of the projects are mostly projects that you have seen before. And they're outlined, of course, in the actual capital budget document, and I've got them summarized here. I will walk through them, and I know we have, again, folks on the call from curriculum, and Ralph is on the call. So we've got a number of people who can certainly chime in and add more background and respond to questions, but I'll walk through and summarize them. The project after the Briggs project is curriculum materials and textbooks. And the request here for next year is for $747,000. And those funds would be used for K-5 literacy resources, for culturally relevant library materials, and for 9 to 12 literacy resources. The library materials, the superintendent had identified, and others in the district have identified, that many of our library materials are really dated and are not reflective of the student population of Norwalk, and it would be appropriate to supplement and replace some of these materials with more up-to-date library materials that are more culturally relevant and reflective of our student population. And the other literacy resources identified here had been identified last year as well for this year. The instructional technology request for next year is $1,456,700. And that includes the last year of one-to-one replacements, and also includes funding for networking gear, projectors, and hardware. Ralph has recommended that after this last year of one-to-one replacements, that we look to move the replacement of one-to-one devices into the district operating budget, because we're going to, at that point, be on a refresh cycle that will just essentially need to continue in perpetuity to plan to replace devices, obviously get new devices for students when they first come in to kindergarten, replace at 5th grade, and then replace again at 9th grade. And so it would really just be a rotating cycle of replacements that we would look to build into future operating budgets. The next project is a continuation of the air conditioning program. And this is the program that have been undertaking for the last several years to install portable or modular air conditioning units in the schools that do not have central air conditioning, and but to provide at least air conditioned spaces for the classroom spaces. And we've made some great headway on this. We still have more schools to go. I'll just jump forward for a minute because I think I have a couple, whoops. Thought I had a couple more slides here. Where are they? How come? I don't know what's happened to my,
Skipping number 6 for some reason. I don't
yeah,
know.
for some reason I seem to be, slides 6 and 7 aren't coming up, but in any event, I'll just continue talking.
Just like get off the slideshow and maybe it'll pop up again.
Well, let's see. No, that's not going to work. We can end slideshow. Okay, so we can go back to, okay, so air conditioning status. This is just to remind everybody sort of where we are. The schools on, and I assumed it changed, right? You see my screen with the air conditioning status on it? Okay. The schools that are fully air conditioned, meaning they have central air, Brian McMahon High School, Norwalk High School, Ponus Ridge School now, both the upper and lower school are what's serving as Jefferson swing space currently. Those are fully air conditioned now. Brookside is fully air conditioned. Actually, the old Jefferson Elementary School, which is being renovated, is new, is air conditioned. And of course, the new renovated school will be air conditioned. Marvin is air conditioned, and the Norwalk Early Childhood Center are air conditioned. The schools on the right are schools where we have installed modular and portable air conditioning units: Columbus, Cranberry, Fox Run, Kendall, Rowton was just finished fairly recently, and Silvermine is actually under construction. The work is happening now. And then the future work scheduled out for the next 5 years, we're proposing Nathan Hale, Wolf Pit, Narragansett, West Rocks, and Rowayton. And then, of course, the new Cranberry School in Jefferson will be fully air conditioned. And when the new Columbus building is eventually built, then that will be fully air conditioned, along with any renovation that's undertaken to the existing Columbus building. So that's the plan to ultimately complete the air conditioning initiative. Back here, and let's see. So asbestos abatement is also an ongoing project, and we have a number of schools that continue to have asbestos floor tiles is primarily what we're talking about here. And in a number of our buildings, those floor tiles are in pretty poor condition. You can go into a number of our buildings and find that we have duct tape on the floors where tiles have started to crack or pop up, or have worn to the point where it's not safe to leave them as they are. And the solution to date has been to literally put duct tape down on the floors. And we don't see that as a particularly good solution. We need to remove those and replace that floor tiling. So the funding for next year would be for Nathan Hale, followed by Rowton, Wolf Pet, Narragansett, and then West Rocks. Bathroom renovation. This is actually a new project, but I think the bathrooms are widely recognized as these are really the gang bathrooms that we're talking about. in many of our buildings are really in extremely poor condition. They date back to original construction of these buildings back in the 50s or 60s, and they just need to be, refurbished and renovated. So we've put $500,000 in each of the next 5 years to renovate bathrooms with, again, Nathan Hale, Rowton, West Rocks, and then locations to be determined after that. One of the recommendations from Bill Hodel, our facilities director, was to coordinate work when projects are going to require that a building be closed. He would prefer to consolidate and coordinate that work so we can keep buildings closed for the shortest periods of time possible. So that if typically a building will need to be closed for the asbestos abatement work, and he's indicating that the bathroom renovation work also generally we should close the buildings for the bathroom renovation work because of the fact that we may encounter asbestos, number one, and number two, the bathroom renovation work will typically require turning the water off to the building, and that just makes it not really feasible to have students and staff in a building for summer learning when the water is shut off. So for those reasons, he's recommended we consolidate these projects and do them at the same time if it's going to require closure, the summer closure of a building. The fuel tank replacement project is the next project. This was funded at many of our schools in the 2021 capital budget. We still have some schools remaining that also need their underground fuel tanks replaced. So next year, we would look for funding for Tracy, Columbus, and West Rocks. And I guess the year after that, Brian McMahon High School, unless we just pull the tank out and use natural gas in that case. But for next year, Tracy, Columbus, and West Rocks. The emergency repair account is an account that we established several years ago. At this point, there's only about $9,000 left in that account, and it has been really vital when a unexpected emergency comes up. A boiler malfunctions and can't simply be repaired and needs to be replaced. Roof is leaking. Some other critical capital repair comes up that needs immediate attention, and we would typically look to this emergency capital repair account. So we have requested $250,000 in each of the next 5 years for the emergency capital repair account. The fuel tank replacement, by the way, for next year was requested at $400,000. I don't think I mentioned that amount. The next project is cafeteria and kitchen renovations, and this is also a project that we've undertaken at a number of schools already, and it was part of the last strategic operating plan. One of the goals of the last strategic operating plan was to both improve the dining environment and to make the dining environment less institutional and more family-oriented dining, and also to improve the district's kitchens so that we could do more scratch cooking and less of just reheating of meals, pre-prepared meals. And so the kitchen and cafeteria renovation that's been requested is for Rowton Middle School at $750,000, followed by Nathan Hale the year after that, Marvin the year after that, Silvermine the year after that, and then Fox Run the year after that. We've already, as you know, completed a number of those kitchen and cafeteria projects. We did the cafeteria at Rowayton, and we've done kitchen and cafeteria upgrades at Kendall School, at Tracy School and at West Rocks School. So paving and ADA compliance, we've done a significant amount of paving work over the last 5 years, but there are a number of schools still that have not been touched in 20 or 30 years. And so we've requested funding for next year for Kendall Elementary School and West Rocks Middle School. So the request for next year is for $350,000, and that would both repave the parking lot as well as redo sidewalks, and including ADA compliance for sidewalks. The following year, we put in a request for $500,000 for Brian McMahon High School, then $350,000 for Brookside and Rowayton. And then that will complete the paving work. We have requested a continuation in years 4 and 5 of the capital plan to look at ADA compliance inside the buildings, and we believe there's further issues to correct inside the building. So we think that will also be an ongoing project. District vehicle replacement. Bill Hodel has requested $110,000 next year to replace a rack body truck and with a snowplow, and has proposed making this again as the vehicle. They did purchase one vehicle this year, so this would replace a second vehicle. These are vehicles that are 16 or more years old, and significant mileage on these vehicles, and would replace them with propane fueled vehicles. There are, that completes, I believe, the projects that are requested for 21-22. If you look at the actual capital budget document, you'll see that there are requests for a few projects in the following year. In 22-23, we've requested $650,000 for boiler replacements, and Bill Hodel has identified that there are 4 boilers in the district that are approaching end of life. He doesn't believe they need to be replaced in next year's budget, but he has requested funding in the out years to replace boilers in buildings. Obviously, boilers are not necessarily sexy, but they're pretty essential to operating our schools and during the winter. So we want to make sure we don't find ourselves in a situation where we don't have heat in any of our buildings. There's also a project in the 22-23 year, which is a continuation project, and that is the Silvermine driveway renovation project. And that was a project that had been requested previously. The city did fund the Silvermine driveway at $80,000 for design work only. And unfortunately, because of COVID-19 and the demands that and the additional workload that placed on everyone, and certainly placed on the facilities department in terms of getting buildings ready for return to occupancy under the COVID-19 situation. There were just a whole slew of things that had to happen, from moving out hundreds or thousands of pieces of furniture and getting storage containers for the furniture, and ordering all kinds of personal protective equipment, and ordering air purifying units and getting those set up, and hand washing stations, and the hand sanitizing units, and getting those in all the classrooms. Obviously, all that went into trying to get school reopened safely this year, and a lot of that work fell on facilities. And so they were not able to move forward with the design work on the Silvermine driveway yet. And rather than ask for money in next year's capital budget, with the expectation that we wouldn't be in a position to move that project forward immediately, we did push it out a year. And that was the reason for pushing that out for 1 year, was that we've just been unable in the facilities office to get the design work completed on the Silver Mine driveway. There is one other project, I believe, one or two other projects that are out year projects. There's also a project in 22-23 for Rowayton roof replacement over a small portion of the building, the C wing. The rest of the roof has been replaced, but there's one small portion of the roof at Rowayton that has not been replaced, and Bill Hodell is indicating that it does need to be addressed sometime in the near future, and so he's requested that for 22-23. And there was a request from Brian McMahon High School related to an engineering pathways expansion. We did put that in the out year of the plan, and we think that will have to be evaluated as we get closer to the final year of the plan, and certainly we'll look at it more closely at that time. So I think that pretty well concludes the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and then ask if we have any questions. I do have the actual capital budget document that I could share if that's helpful, but if no one has any, wants to make reference to it, I'll leave us not sharing for the time being.
Well, I think it's a great first public presentation of our capital priorities for the next few years, Tom. And I think this is a great time to get some comments, questions, and discussion from the board. Barbara, I see your hand.
I was actually waving to my son.
Oh.
I'd like to hear from my colleagues first, if that's okay.
Of course.
I have a couple comments, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Heidi.
All right. Sorry, let me get my video on. Thank you. If we can go back, let me start with the first part with the Briggs Family Community Center. I assume that'll kind of be the pulse of Newark Public Schools, right, within that building. And Dr. Estrella, you already answered one of my questions in regards to PD, which we'll utilize for staff, some like professional development that can happen within that building. Also, another question, I'm thinking, looking at the building, I know we'll be renovating it. Do we have an idea time frame wise, if that does happen, what year we're looking at? And also, once that's done, are we looking also at the parking? Because I'm thinking the parking was pretty tight. So if we're having PD, we're having it as a welcome center. What about the parking situation? I assume that would be included in part of this.
I keep talking to myself.
It's okay.
So one of the things that we've been in conversation is how do we maximize parking in that particular facility? There is a basketball court in the front of the building that
Yes.
we request an easement to have access to, and we can add additional parking in that area. Our food services is also in that area, and there's some parking available in that vicinity, which is at walking distance from the building, that when we have larger events, we could potentially also utilize. I think one of the biggest challenges is that the parking area is not as big as other sites. So we are also looking into having conversations with our neighboring. There's a complex next to the facility that has a lot of parking, and maybe working a partnership that if we have a really large event, we could potentially use that space. But we're going to try to maximize it by opening up additional spaces, either towards the front of the building where the parking lot is, and also utilizing some of the foods for the food services area, which has some parking as well as additional parking spaces.
And Dr. Estrella, this would be year round. I assume the building would be open year round, including the summer. Is that correct?
It would be a year round building.
Okay.
Also, One of the things I had we had a meeting and we had the opportunity to invite Godfrey, Colin, and Diana to kind of like, I told them like, let's take a walk around the district, and they were able to see also how tight it is on the 3rd floor. And also we have some space on the 1st floor of City Hall, but despite that, in special education, people are doubled up. In curriculum and instruction, people are doubled up. We extended the space in one wing all the way to almost the front of the entrance to add additional cubicles. But even by doing that, we don't have enough space to comfortably fit the entire team. So the brick site will also alleviate some of the concerns we have with space here, because a lot of that personnel will be sited at that location permanently, allowing us to have more space for curriculum and instruction and special education personnel here on site as well.
And then just one other quick thing, just switching gears for a moment, the Career and Tech High School. We're looking possibly or potentially a project date or a project request, I should say, excuse me, for 2025. My thoughts were, you know, it's 2025, so it's 2021. So we have a couple of years now until this potentially could happen. Have we thought about maybe at some point, if we decide to pursue this, reaching out to our current high schoolers before they graduate, and you know, anywhere from 9th to 12th grade, and then also maybe middle school students that within the couple of years, starting at 6th grade, they'll be in high school. So maybe getting a perspective from our current high school students and then our incoming high school students. So it's just a thought and a suggestion, but kind of figuring out what they're also looking for in a career and technical high school.
So interestingly that you mentioned that, I meet on a monthly basis with a part of students from Brian McMahon and Norwalk High School for exactly that reason, because I really want to make sure that we have student voice in the decisions that we're making. I gave, I think, the whole cabinet a lot of homework from my last conversation yesterday with them. They gave me a over 22-point item agenda to go over with them. So I was quite impressed by the thoughtfulness of the work that they're trying to do. And they're definitely going to have a lot to say about what needs to happen with the Korean technical school once it happens, or even before, to guide us in the work. Already, as you know, they want to be part of some of the committees, and look forward to having them as part of the strategic plan advisory group as well.
Yeah, I think having that student representation and their voices, you know, for middle school, that'll be attending our high schools, and then, you know, our current high school students that have already gone through it and what their vision and what they see potentially could happen. So that's awesome that that work has already begun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Mike?
Alex, I had 2 different questions for you. One, can you give us, I mean, you probably don't have it at your fingertips, but I think a number that would help is kind of how many new students we process every year. I know I remembered, you know, when the City Hall, when we were really open, and I spent a lot of time up there, and this woman named Elizabeth, who sits outside of Joe Rios's office, I know she's since retired, but she used to process all these. And I mean, there wasn't a time I walked by there that she didn't have 2, 3, 4 families waiting for her to deal with. So my guess is the numbers are a lot bigger than we might assume. You know, it's not the net increase. You know, we have so much turnover of kids, of new families coming and people leaving, that the number that we process, you know, it's, I don't know, who knows? It could be 1,000+ kids a year. I don't know.
So
but if you have that data, I think I would share it.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers at my fingertip, but we can definitely get them. One thing I can tell you is that our biggest enrollment cycle happens in lower elementary and 9th grade. And a lot of that has to do with the immigration patterns. So you will see a lot, like right now, in the past few weeks, we've enrolled a number of kids into our schools. I think one day we had, 10 students enrolled. So it depends on the time of year and the cycle for enrollment. One of the things you'll see, because the multilingual learner program is in Brian McMahon, you'll see when we present the enrollment data that Brian McMahon appears to have a larger student population than Norwalk High, and a lot of it has to do with some of the enrollment patterns in the district, particularly with our immigrant families and where the programs are. And that's creating a shift, but we can definitely provide that information in more detail.
Another thing to touch on is, we only really make the student and the families present all their paperwork when they initially enroll their kid. So be that in kindergarten or when they first, come to Norwalk. But we did a study with, blanking on the name, maybe Frank, you remember, the companies in Hartford, and they looked at kind of our enrollment, some of the issues we had, or maybe this was when Patty was here, I can't remember now, but there was a lot of talk that we should have a second time where all the kids have to basically reapply and prove that they're residents and provide all this documentation. And one of the levels, I think it was thought, maybe it was the report or this consultant recommended we do that when the kids come into 9th grade. The problem is, all that staff that would process this at the schools, they're not there necessarily in the summertime, and it would become this, nightmare for starting school. But I would assume with this Welcome Center, this could, they're open year round, that if we did make people resubmit all their paperwork for when the student goes into 9th grade or whatever, there were different cutoffs that were discussed, so that people, could prove that they still live in Norwalk and they are right, they have the right to go to Norwalk Public Schools. We don't have that second check at this point, I don't believe.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. You're talking about residency certification.
Yeah, there was a lot of work was done on that, and we really realized we had a problem that we never second checked, when the student was midstream through our system, and that this was something we would really benefit from. Other districts do it, and we just couldn't figure out how to do it cost effectively. So we, as of yet, haven't done it, but this might be another role for the Welcome Center. And I would get your hands on this study by, Brenda, do you remember the name of the company, the people who did all this work?
I don't remember the name, but we can certainly look it up.
But I mean, it's got to be lying. It's got to be lying around. We spent money doing it, and we invested a lot of time and resources into trying to to improve our system.
Yeah, we can look it up. And to your point, Mike, it's not just for the kids who are coming into what we have now as our ELL Welcome Center. It is kids who are coming in, all to kindergarten as well, and it could be used for other purposes as we go. So it's a more expansive vision than the ELL center that we have here.
And I think so. This system also did this consultant's report did recommend that we have, a centralized registration. We would benefit from that.
Yeah.
Broadly, not just for our overseas arrivals.
Yeah, the decentralized registration is a constant pain point for both our families and also for our schools as well, whether it's kindergarten or throughout the summer as well. So it definitely alleviates those issues. So,
and then I have one last question in a different vein. How was the timeline chosen for the adding air conditioning to those remaining schools? What were the criteria that were used to decide the order?
Well, I think a couple things. One is, which I had referred to, was wanting to coordinate the work that we do at the buildings so that you know, particularly if it's going to require closure of a building, that it, you know, we limit the closures. And then in terms of the, you know, remaining projects, the air conditioning, you know, it was really looking at which buildings have had some improvements over the last, you know, 5 years, and which ones have not yet had improvements, and trying to balance those needs to the extent we can.
Okay, thanks.
I think Erica had her hand up at one point.
I think Godfrey was talking too.
Oh, okay.
He was muted. We can't hear you, Godfrey.
We're not able to hear you, Godfrey. No. I might suggest, if you're using AirPods, to use the computer mic, because I know that's happened with me sometimes.
I also had this problem in March and April, and I found that if I left the meeting and came back in, I was able to be heard.
My question was about the literacy center in the back of Briggs. Would that be maintained on that same plot, or would we move it out of?
Impacted, that wouldn't be part of the project because it's disconnected to the building. What is going to be great is that when we do the initial evals for families that are seeking special education services, it's kind of like a one-stop shop, because we will then have all of the services in one location versus in multiple sites throughout the district.
That site's been serving as our central evaluation site since March, since COVID, when we reopened in July, since July 6th, actually.
Erica, you're muted.
I made it till 9:25. Will it be renovated, or is they considered completely different buildings?
They're completely different buildings.
They are, okay. I know that they're physically two different buildings. I wasn't sure if they were considered one though.
Tom, what portion of the Briggs Family Center would be reimbursable from the state? Do we have any indication?
At this point, we don't know of any reimbursable opportunities. But what we're trying to look at is potential like grant funding, if we partner with different local organizations, like a healthcare center, to find resources. I'm also trying to work with the philanthropical wing of like Norwalk to see how we can collaborate in this endeavor, because I think that this will be a really robust project that, if we all collectively come together, could really bridge a really great experience for our families, but also a really good resource center that brings together all of the different partners to one hub.
I definitely look forward to hearing that evolving discussion. I think everything you presented is very interesting, and for me, I'm waiting with bated breath for the facilities feasibility study, for them to really reveal from an engineering standpoint and so forth what our needs are in the building, because I think the Welcome Center is a fantastic idea, and I think it will really benefit so many families and help us streamline and modernize our processes. And I think we also can't lose hold of the fact that we articulated 5 years ago that we had major needs in our buildings, and some of them have been addressed, which is a huge win. But some of them have not. And the community feels very strongly about their sort of end user experience, because it, you know, having a school where the bathrooms are clean and and you're not in a 90-degree second floor classroom in June or in September, these are really important to our stakeholders. These are important items that they've asked for year after year after year. And we are making progress on all of those goals. But I think we have to really weigh and determine with the city and with the planning commission and the council and the BET what Norwalk can afford, and then prioritize accordingly. And I'm very happy to hear your interest in some philanthropic partnerships, because I think that would take some of the weight of this request off of the capital budget if it was a shared project. So I appreciate that line of inquiry, and I hope we can continue down that road.
Thank you, Barbara. Godfrey, I see you back online. I just want to double check to see if your audio is back up now. Oh no, we can't hear you. Oh no. Okay, unfortunately, we've got that. This is the downside of these Zoom meetings.
With AI, if you can try to go back on.
I think he's logging off and coming back.
He was muted, I noticed. I think that's why we couldn't hear him. He was on mute for some reason.
Yes, but even when he had unmuted himself, for some reason the audio wasn't coming through.
While we wait for him, can I just make one point?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, just in response to what Barbara just said, that if there are all these crying needs at these other schools, I think, you know, those are obviously very valid needs, which, as she said, we've been addressing, but there are many still unaddressed. I think this Welcome Center at the same time is also very necessary. What we don't need, truly, is this new Norwalk High School. And I think we need to realize at some point, we're going to have to make a decision that the resources are limited. I think I was on a call the other day that the city's bonding is maxed out and they really can't borrow any more money on behalf of projects for us. And, you know, this Norwalk High School is taking money away from schools that really need it. We don't need the new Norwalk High School. We know it's a whole political shenanigan. And, you know, we're going to have to make a decision at some point. And I know the thinking has been, let's not give, you know, punch a gift horse in the mouth, but it's really not a gift horse. And we are going to hurt our other schools and our other needs to build this trophy that is unnecessary.
Thank you for that perspective.
You're welcome.
So unfortunately, I don't see Godfrey back on. I want to make sure if anybody else had any questions, comments, or discussion on the capital budget as presented. I will say again, you know, this is, as folks know here, just to remind anybody who may be watching, this is the first public presentation of the capital budget request, and it does go through a reconciliation process. This is going to be discussed by the Common Council in concert with the mayor, the Board of Estimates and Taxation, and you know, I think a lot of the points that we raised tonight, a lot of the questions will be further fleshed out as we get to a point that that makes sense for all stakeholders. And just so everybody knows, there is going to be a more in-depth discussion of these budgets at the Finance Committee meeting, which is scheduled for tomorrow. And then there's a joint meeting of the Board Finance Committee and the Council Finance Committee scheduled for Thursday. So there's going to be a lot of very robust discussion on this as we move forward. And again, you know, I think I'm looking forward to, as Barbara said, a very collaborative discussion and effort with our colleagues on the council and mayor's office and the BET to get to a point where we can move forward.
Agree.
All right, so that was kind of like stalling, so Godfrey can come back. But I will say, again, I think looking at this, my thoughts on this capital budget as presented initially, they're just saying that duct tape can fix anything. But I do think that when we think about some of the needs of our physical structures, our kids deserve a little bit more than duct tape. And I appreciate that this budget request, looking out for the next five or so years, is taking into consideration some of the immediate needs of our physical plants, and forward thinking about what are some of the ways we can grow and evolve and continue to offer high quality instruction to all our students here in Norwalk. So I do appreciate, again, the work. I know it's been a lot of very minute numbers crunching, and my hat's off to Dr. Estrella and her entire team for getting us to this point.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you all the members of the team, Mr. Hamilton, Bill Holdell, that's not here, Frank, with the work around the capital improvement plan. I know it took a lot of time to think through the priorities. We have many priorities that are not listed here as well. So it was great to work with the team in highlighting these. And I just want to reiterate, particularly with the Welcome Center, that through my listening and learning conversations, families continuously spoke about, I love the schools, but let me tell you, when I was registering, I didn't even know where to go, or I had to go to 3 or 4 or 5 different places. So that came up a lot in discussion, and I'm hoping that besides all of the necessary components that this capital improvement plan has for the needs of our schools, that we can also bring to life the Welcome Center, so that our families have a robust and place where they can have a one-stop shop for everything they need. So thank you.
That Godfrey's back.
Yeah, I think he's still having the audio issue. He just texted me. So Godfrey, we will get a chance to address that question. As I said, we're going to have many opportunities to dive deeper into these budgets in the coming days and weeks. And just so everybody knows, we do have our business meeting scheduled for a week from tonight, where there will be another opportunity to address some of these questions.
Can I just do one quick tech support suggestion before we let it go? Because I really want Godfrey to have voice.
Go ahead, Ralph.
He just mentioned that he's been doing Zoom and Teams all day. And I know from my own experience that if your Teams is using your mic and camera, it can supersede Zoom. So make sure you're closed out of every Teams meet on your tabs and in your open applications on your computer. And then it's possible that you may then get your audio back. Sorry to jump in. I went through this a few weeks ago.
I'm trying to call Godfrey to see if he could just speak through my phone. Maybe that will help.
While we're trying that, I just want to echo what Dr. Estrella said when I was present at the tours that she was doing. The feedback I heard from parents were that they weren't even aware of our theme schools or magnets, and they didn't know that they had options to lottery into some schools, and that some schools that lended themselves to interests that their children had were available in other parts of the district. And I personally didn't know that as well. And I'm so glad that I happened to land in the neighborhood that I'm in, and my child is enrolled in Silvermine. But I have to tell you, I wasn't aware that the dual language program existed until I was down the street from it. So, that's also very exciting, is that we're exposing parents at the pre-K level to the opportunities within the school district that lend themselves to their children's interests, and giving them that opportunity to start them on the path in the appropriate school that makes sense for their child, if they can lottery into it or if there's room within that system.
Godfrey?
You guys are awesome at making sure. So the question I have is mainly around just safety relatedness of buildings. I know Tom has presentation earlier, pointing out some of the refurbishing the building could need. I don't know if he spoke to any plans to address entry points, the multiple entry points that exist in our old buildings, or just enhancing our infrastructure to shelter in place. Again, ensuring, that buildings are safely ready for our kids to come back. And that was just that question.
I'll start out and then maybe Frank can jump in on that. Certainly safety of our buildings is of paramount importance, obviously, especially since Sandy Hook, it's been, a very important issue everywhere. So there are statewide standards, and to my understanding, we are in compliance with the standards. We have undertaken a number of projects, though, to strengthen the entryway. I know at West Rocks, when we did some work up there, we specifically added this man trap, if you will, which is one of the recommendations is that people, before they can get into the building, have to go through a two-stage process. But I don't believe that all of our buildings currently have that, but any building that we are currently doing renovation work, major renovation work on, certainly that's going to be or is being built into the design. So whether it's the Jefferson renovation project or the Cranberry School or Columbus School, all of those schools certainly will have the latest and greatest. I do know, again, we do actually have some additional safety work that has already been funded and is in process at the high schools in terms of providing better capability to lock down the building in the event of a lockdown. And again, I believe all the buildings, are properly locked and employees, we have security at all the buildings, and people have to get buzzed into the buildings. I don't know, Frank, if you can kind of expound on some of that.
Sure, Tom. That's right. We're doing some additional upgrades at the high schools. I think a couple of the major improvements that we've made over the past couple of years have been the move away from analog cameras at our schools to digital cameras. Our district preparedness coordinator, who sits here in central office, has, as well as myself, access to all of the digital camera angles and screens at the various schools. So at any point we can go in and take a look if there's a problem happening. The other major upgrade is the visitor management system that's been in for a couple of years now, and that has proven to be well worth the effort to install it and to keep it up to date. A few years before that, we did some of the film on the windows outside of the schools. It's not bulletproof, but it's shatterproof, and that was something that we took on. And as Tom said, each of the schools now has a man trap that buys the school essentially some time. And the board might remember when we put together the reopening plan, one of our concerns was allowing students to remain outside and to do a longer entry when school opens by opening up more than one main entry point. And we've been able to do that effectively this year and safely. So we've done quite a lot in this area, and we are up to code at all of our schools, and we'll continue to make improvements as time goes on.
Thank you.
Glad we got that question in. So is there any other further questions, comments, or discussion on the capital budget? Excellent. Well, thank you all for a really robust discussion. Again, thank you to the entire team for helping us get here. And I know we're all looking forward to having this this conversation continue in a very collaborative and productive way. So this is a great start to what should hopefully be a very productive budget season. We did not, yeah, Ralph?
No, just do we want to ask for public comment? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just about to say, we did not get any emailed public comments, but I want to make sure that if there's anybody here who would like to make a comment, we give them that opportunity.
Yes, we have one hand raised, and that's Joseph Jenderko. Hang on one second. Let me just put him up to be able to speak. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Good evening, board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The budget that was presented tonight has a long way to go before its final adoption, and the NFT continues to reach out in an effort to create a better partnership and working relationship with central office and the superintendent. To that end, we believe communication is vital to create the necessary relationship to help repair our fractured relationship. We seek the elimination of the hybrid remote in-person model that is currently in place should there be a need to continue remote teaching in the future. We believe that a better situation can be created and implemented to ensure our students receive the best educational outcome. The budget must look to spare and restore some of the most needed resources in our district for our most younger students. We believe that kindergarten and first grade paraprofessionals must be restored. These individuals help to create a better, more vibrant classroom and allow for the needs of more students to be met each day. These paraprofessionals help many of our students with disadvantages succeed and overcome obstacles. We share the concerns about equity and support the need for more sound educational planning and outcomes for the additional magnet funding. Plans must be transparent and address the needs of the students and the staff members. These plans cannot be created in isolation without the input of the stakeholders in their school communities. Finally, with central office suddenly and inappropriately suppressing teachers' salaries and potential career advancements due to the need for this funding, we request a careful review of all of the consultants and their contracts. This funding can better be allotted to help teachers advance their knowledge and redefine their teaching career and craft. In closing, communication is key, collaboration is key, and respect is key. Employees are the engine that drive our educational community. In valuing our teachers and other school staff members, more successful outcomes for our students can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate that. Ralph, is there any other public comments? Nope. In that case, I think that we can entertain a motion to adjourn. I see from Barbara, seconded by Heidi. All in favor? Say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
That looks unanimous. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to everybody for getting us started on a really good foot with this budget, with these budgets.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Colin.
Thank